Hello, everyone, and welcome in the React Native Show podcast episode about Expo. I feel like this episode was long overdue. Expo is a huge part of React Native, and I don't feel really comfortable talking about it myself, so I brought two terrific guests with me today, Cedric and Jon. Hello, guys.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
Who are actually working at Expo, with Expo every day. And they will help me out to explain how Expo got started, how Expo is evolving, and how it can help you out with your developer experience, like day-to-day workflow. So maybe let's start with introductions. First guest is Jon Samp. Jon, how are you? Who are you, and what is your current role at Expo?
I'm doing well, just having my morning coffee. So right now, I'm the head of product at Expo. I also do a lot of our design work. So if you've seen our homepage or our web UIs or our docs, I worked on those, but also just trying to help make sure we build products that developers actually need. So hopefully we can talk a little bit more about that on this show today.
Yeah, definitely. I want to go over everything with you. And my next guest is Cedric. Cedric, again, how are you today? Who are you and what do you do at Expo?
Hi, so my name is Cedric van Putten. I am pretty much a software consultant or a software engineer at Expo. I work on like all kinds of different pieces of Expo, from the SDK to some small things on the website, all the way to CLI. I'm mostly focused around dev tooling, so that includes the CLI, it includes the VS Code extension, GitHub Actions, like all kinds of tools that users interact with to work with Expo. Yeah, that's pretty much my day-to-day job.
Thank you. And both of you just recently, a few months ago, had talks at App.js conference in Krakow when you were talking about Expo stuff. So great to have you here. And like I said in the beginning, I want to discuss Expo in terms of developer experience company. And I feel like if we were doing this episode 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it would have been completely different thing, completely different episode. Because back then, when I was doing React Native, I perceived Expo as a different way of writing React Native, as a platform that you do it on. Right now, when you look at the docs, look at the different things that Expo does, it more seems like a lot of different utilities, a lot of different functions that are loosely coupled together. You can use some of that, you can use all of them. And like, it's the whole like experience, the whole spectrum of using Expo. So Expo is not like just one product anymore. It's more like a spectrum of different things. So I want to talk about that. And let's start with the perspective from a few years ago. How did it all start? What was it at the beginning?
Yeah, so how Expo started, it's actually a couple of different stories here. First of all, our CEO, his name is Charlie Cheever. He is the founder of Quora, which is a website that you can go to that you might know about. And he was in charge of making the mobile apps there. And this is before React Native, before Expo. And while he was making these mobile apps, he was working with a team of talented developers, and it took them months and months to get something into the App Store to show what was a website that you can ask questions on and then get answers for. And he found this was just really frustrating and really hard. There was so much red tape with app review. Back then, it took even longer. I think it might have taken almost a week to get app review. And just getting this whole process going was super frustrating. So React Native was just in its nascent phase back then. This was sometime around 2015 or just a little before. And so he started looking at that as a solution. So after Quora, he started looking at like, who are the biggest React Native contributors? And that's where he met our co-founder, James, another important person at Expo who you might have seen on Twitter named Brent. They all got together and started working on Expo. They eventually released it, at React Rally in 2015. And that's kind of how everything got started. Like, how can we make this better?
It was before the first release of React Native. It was like even before the React Native was a thing, right?
Yeah, it was during that exact same year that they were both released. So yeah, React Native, it wasn't like Expo was built way after as an augmentation to React Native. They were actually started around the same time.
Yeah. So we are 7-8 years later. And how does this team look like now? How many teams you have? How many people? How do you guys do your work on Expo?
Yeah, so actually that's a pretty interesting question. So we've got about 30 people working on two large overlapping areas. One of them is our open source area. This is where like Expo comes in. If you've been to our GitHub, this is all of our open source tools. This is our SDK. This is everything you use to develop your apps. Then we have a different side of things that we work on, which is our services areas. If you've built your app with EAS, Expo Application Services, that's what that's a part of. We have a few different services there right now. There's EAS Build. We can submit your app for you. We can also update your app for you as well, which has a few interesting applications, not just updating your production users, but updating your own developers for preview and PRs is pretty neat. So those are the two big areas. But honestly, we have like 30 areas internally just because there's so much surface area to what we do. I mean, we've got docs, we've got our CLI, we've got our website, we've got our Expo Go app, and on and on and on and on. So there's actually a lot of stuff we work on, tons of surface area. And luckily, we've got 30 people who can do a lot of things.
Yeah, and this is like tied into what I said in the beginning, that this is a spectrum, right? And like what I'm really interested in about is that how are all of those different pieces are worked on together, and how do you guys like maintain that every small piece works, if it should work with like pure React Native, just a CLI React Native, it works with just straight React Native, and it works with Expo, and it works with like other pieces. So this is like really, really interesting that you have only 30 people doing all of those things, and you probably have like 30 services. You have like 30 different pieces and 30 people working on those 30 different pieces.
Yeah, that's true.
So how would you just summarize, how would you bottom line the Expo today question, what it is?
It's I would say it's a very hard question to answer, since there are, like, as Jon said, there are so many moving pieces all tying in together. But basically, I think one of the biggest misconception about Expo today is that Expo is built on top of React Native, and once you go Expo, you cannot do anything else. Like, all those smaller pieces of Expo and what it is together as Expo today can be used, like, it can be optionally opt-in, or can like be not used at all. Like, you can actually use the Expo CLI without any of the Expo native modules. You can use Expo without any of our services. It's pretty much whatever works best for you kind of scenario. And we try to communicate like what every individual piece does. Like, we have config plugins and Prebuilt in the CLI that can help during upgrading, or like having the native part being managed by us, by the Expo system, where like, again, you can use it or not, but all those smaller things tie so hard together, which eventually, like, it's kind of hard to explain, but let's see, how can I explain this better? Basically, everything with Expo is progressively opt-inable or opt-outable, where so many moving pieces work together that, yes, there could be issues, but that's what we're trying to cover with QA, that we're trying to cover with our quarterly releases, or every 3 release per year, all the way up until like a working product. I'm not sure if I answered that question correctly, but
I get that because I was preparing for this episode. So I read a bunch of things and I watched your talks. And in our previous conversation, when we were preparing for this episode together, you said something that I said in the beginning of this episode, that Expo is a developer experience company, that you want to like make the path from development to production as smooth as possible, as easy as possible, to focus on the on building products and not on the like red tape around it. So yeah, I feel like this is a very noble goal, but obviously you are a business as well. So I think it's not not a secret that like you can draw a lot of comparison between Vercel that has their services, their paid services, and like their maintained Next.js, and Expo that has the developer utilities, and also you have the services, right? That, and it all ties together, and you can use one or the other, and that's how you make money doing the services. So I would like to also touch on something that I haven't in the beginning of this episode, but I would really need you guys both to help me out here, because like I'm not a regular user. Like, sorry to say that. I know that I should be, but my main focus during my day-to-day work is on like legacy project with like just bare bones CLI, React Native, and also like brownfield kind of integrations. So I don't do Expo a lot. I use it in my like hobby project, which I don't have really time to do anymore. But so with the latest and greatest, I feel like I really need to ask you for the walkthrough. Let's do the walkthrough. Let's do the walkthrough from initialization of the project, then just development, testing, maybe QAing, testing again, to production, and to like over the air releases.
Yes.
So who would like to take this question?
I can start, see where I end up. But basically, like any project can use EAS. Let's start there. It doesn't really matter if you're using Expo or just like plain React Native with the React Native.
And EAS is Expo Application Services, which allows you to like deploy and other things.
Exactly. So you can use EAS build, you can use EAS submit, you can even use EAS update, but it requires a bit more integration in the app itself without Expo at all. Like you can just build whatever you want, and we will make sure it arrives to the store. Then on the project side, as I tried to explain earlier, where Expo consists of multiple parts all working together, you can use like the Expo native modules with the React Native community CLI. Like you can do that. There is no reason why it shouldn't, since it's, again, just React Native. But if you want to go further and fully adopt the Expo workflow in terms such as Prebuilt, where you can update your project pretty much with one command, then the Expo CLI comes into play, and then you have to use that instead. So walking back from EAS all the way to the project, you can just get started like with a new project using Create Expo app, or if you have an existing React Native project, you can use install Expo modules. It's a tool that helps you install whatever is needed on a native side to adopt the Expo workflow. Then if you are coming from an old project, you can decide if it's worth to opt into Prebuilt. You don't have to, again, like you can use whatever native files you have in your project and we will build that. But if you do want to adopt Prebuilt, I think Keith Gurek had a great talk about that on Chain React. So if you're interested in that, I would highly recommend you watch that video as well. But you can decide if you want to opt into that. Then you can decide if you want to use EAS to build it. I mean, you can always build things yourself, even when you're using the full Expo workflow. We just tried to make it so convenient for you that it's almost like not a good idea to do it yourself, because it's so easy compared to the other version. And then from there, you're pretty much on like anything related to Expo already.
I want to go back to something you said, the Prebuilt. Can you explain why would I use Prebuilt? What
Yes.
it does for me?
Yes. So Prebuilt is actually like a term that goes hand in hand with another one, which is config plugins. So we basically created something that changed the management of the native files. So, for example, if you have your project with an Android and iOS folder, you can make any change you want there, and it will be built into your app. Now, what would happen if you add a dependency that requires native changes? Like usually what happened before, like Prebuilt, it was documented that you had to make those changes. You will do them and you will save them. Unfortunately, if React Native updates and it requires extensive native code changes, you have accumulated all those dependencies, you have to go manually through your native code, update them like one by one, see if things still work. And basically what Prebuilt does is automate that. So let's say you're using Stripe, which is a native library with config plugin shipped with the library itself. The only thing you have to do is delete your Android and iOS folders, upgrade React Native if you want to, and then just run Prebuilt. Because with config plugins, it basically regenerates the whole native layer from whatever the base was, so whatever React Native version you want to use. Meaning that upgrading is pretty much instantly without too much addition. If you do want to add some other native code changes yourself, but still want to maintain Prebuilt, you can write your own config plugins. We have on our docs page, like an extensive list of all the things you can do with it. But that's in short what Prebuilt is. It's a bit hard to grasp, and I think we're trying to start to coin the term continuous native regeneration, CNG.
Yeah, I've heard that.
That basically encapsulates all those smaller pieces like Prebuilt, config plugins, and more. But maybe that concept might be a bit easier for users to recognize and to understand.
Yeah, I actually work right now in a project that use this, not the Expo config plugins and regeneration, but the same concept that we have CMake files that are actually generating our native project based on some flags and some config files to create different versions, different flavors of the same project for all of the platforms. So yeah, I know how this can be really a powerful tool to flavorize the application, but also to maintain the how do you say that? To maintain the stability, like you say, the underlying files are changing, but you apply your config changes on top of that files. Okay, so I guess, Cedric, thank you so much. I guess we covered the development phase of, we will be back in that phase again. We will touch on some like particular maybe libraries or maybe some particular tools that we can use, but just to go with this from development to production scenario right now, maybe then we can move on to Expo application services. So you use all of those commands, you do the pre-generate, you do all of that. And then I have my product and I want to test it, I want to ship it. So what do I use from Expo World then?
Yeah, so let me jump in here about this with EAS. So EAS, that's Expo Application Services, and it's services that we build directly for Expo apps. So they're going to work well out of the box. With that though, we try very hard to make sure when you make an Expo app, you don't have to use EAS. EAS is totally separate from all of Expo, and so you could use any service on top of these. So like Cedric was saying, we're trying to be as flexible as possible and allow people to do what they need for their own particular app. That is one of the lessons we've learned a lot over the last 8 years. So talking about development and with your team, this is like where everything starts. How do services even fold in there? One thing that we love doing is something called making a development build. We have this library, it's called Expo Dev Client. And if you include it in your app, it adds developer tools into your own app. This is kind of like how Chrome has developer tools built inside of Chrome, and you do the special hotkey and they open up and then you get to see all kinds of information. This is kind of the same, except for it's your app. And then we have tools that open up inside your app. One of the cool things about making a development build is you can use all of your own native dependencies and everything that's custom about your app while you develop. In addition, it allows some cool other things that sort of like are important now, and we'll talk a little bit later, but you can do something called PR previewing. One of the things that like when I was working on our production app before I worked at Expo that I hated doing was reviewing 10 PRs in a row, having to clone all that code, having to build everything locally in Xcode and Android Studio just to see what these people's code and my colleagues' code was doing. What this allows you to do is create an update, and the development client or the development build can scan a QR code or go to a special link and open those up. So pretty much imagine looking at a PR. Then you're reading through the code. You're like, okay, I think I know what this does. You scan a QR code and it opens up in just a couple of seconds on your phone. That's the kind of speed up that we want to help people do.
It's like with the Expo server, when in my console I get the QR code and I just scan it with Expo app.
Yeah, except for someone else's PR's code.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Except it's not on my network; it's somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And since we're able to save stuff in the cloud, we can relate all of this information for you. So that's a bit about development. Moving on to
from web world, like this is also such a powerful concept that I guess you got inspired by some like web practices, right? With the PR, you can have a link with just a version of the application on that commit, on that PR. That's great.
Yeah, exactly. And while if people believe in Santa Claus, sometimes people will say seeing is believing, but really not seeing this stuff is disbelieving. So it's great to see the previews of what you're building together.
Yeah.
So moving on to what is the next phase of developing with your team? It's going to be reviewing your apps in a way that's more accurate to what you're actually going to ship to the app stores and to your users. So with this, you can make simulator builds and emulator builds. You can also make App Store builds that go to TestFlight and Google's internal test track. One of the cool things that you can do with simulator emulator builds is I can build them locally, just like you would with React Native CLI. And I can test them. So I think those are even between Expo and just using React Native without Expo. However, with Expo, if I've made my build, it's on Expo servers. So you could run a command called EAS build:run, and then you could run my simulator build on your computer, which is going to save you 5 to 15 or something minutes every time you want to preview the exact same thing. So it's little things like this that we can help, I hope, speed people up.
Yeah, and I guess another like parallel, another thing that I could achieve this similar thing of publishing to TestFlight and to all that with, I forgot the name of the library. Sorry.
Oh, like Fastlane or something?
Fastlane. Thank you so much. I use that. Sorry, Fastlane.
Oh, we use it too.
but it's really hard. I remember days when I would spend 2-3 days just polishing the pipeline setup inside the Fastlane, and like just doing everything right there and putting keys, stuff like that. And I guess it's much easier with Expo.
Yeah, and like talking about that is pretty interesting actually, because think like if you are doing your iOS code or Android code, you're working with Swift and Kotlin or Objective-C and Java, you're also doing your TypeScript and JavaScript code. And now to automate it, you need to write Ruby with Fastlane to get this ready to go.
Well, the language itself is not a huge barrier because like the language is easy to grasp, but the tooling around it, the gems, the
bundling and installing,
the commands there are quite a new, exciting, but quite a new word.
Yeah. And so none of this stuff is like incomprehensible to actually do yourself. But on top of that, then you've got your product managers like me and your designers being like, can you build these features? And so it's like, that's just a lot of stuff to deal with.
So are you actually using the Fastlane under the hood in Expo to like deliver all of those services?
Yes, we do use Fastlane for our automations. And that kind of like leads us into like how we deliver code to production app stores too. I think an interesting way to think about our services is we're kind of like an automation team that you can get for really cheap comparatively to hiring people yourself. And like, we'll do all of those automations for you. So it's just like if you were a chef, like we're all the sous chefs in the kitchen, and you can focus on like what the main dish is.
I want to like ask a digression question. With in your experience working with developers that use Expo, do you find them like eager to focus on their product, eager to focus on their just product stuff that they're developing new features, like fixing bugs, and they're just using Expo as a frictionless way to achieve that? Or maybe they miss some of this. Maybe they miss some of this, like tinkering with Fastlane, or like just losing control over the updates. How is that perception?
I would say that if you were starting a startup, right? Where do you want to spend your money on? Is that getting the most fancy setup for you to work on your app? Or is that to actually work on the app and get like a really fast to market ship time? In that sense, like it's pretty much always the latter one, where people just want to focus on their product and not really be annoyed or be interrupted by certain like, platform things like Android specific build configuration issues.
Yeah, resolving issues I get. And I honestly, obviously understand the product perspective and the time to market perspective. What I was asking about is like just a junior or mid developer that like actually enjoys working on tools around the product, like working on, I don't know, S-Link plugin even, right? Like just making your development experience just right for your team. And with all the goodies that we get with Expo, like you just lose a little bit of this connection, right? Connection with like your tooling. This is all I'm saying. If you get some of that reactions like you got from me right now.
Yeah. So we have people who obviously use our automations, but some people who don't and opt in into only some of them. But also, to be really clear, we don't automate everything. If only we could. There's so much stuff to automate outside of what we offer. For instance, like one developer, they have a lot of development builds. So they've made their own like whole CLI and I believe even a menu bar app for people just in their company to go get like the most recent development build on like the latest runtime. That was like a cool automation that they did that I thought was awesome. Some of these features that we're building into our platform right now, like more of this PR previewing stuff, like a few of our customers have built out themselves before we were able to get to it, which is great. And they've like shared how they were doing it and how they would love to see us do it. With that though, an interesting trend I've seen is more and more people are setting us up on CI services to just do things automatically whenever they like push code. And I don't know about you, but in my own personal development journey, the magic of continuous deployment has been pretty awesome and has allowed me to like, I don't know, just do more stuff. So I think there's kind of like two things. Like, yeah, some people love working on tooling and you can always find more tooling to work on.
Yeah, I guess so. Like if you take something away from me, I can like go to the next thing. I can start tinkering with something that you haven't automated yet. But I agree with you. Like the first two Friday afternoon releases, builds, they were exciting and they were like really, I wanted to get my ducks in a row. I wanted to like attend to everything. But every other Friday, I would just rather click deploy and get on my way to home and just check when I got home if everything went smoothly. Yeah, so obviously automation is the clear winner here. Like we want to do that. So end of digression.
But it's important to stay excited about your work though.
Let's go back to application services. I think we ended up on PR previews. What's the next step that I could use from this pipeline, from this workflow to benefit my workflow?
So probably it would be going to the App Store. And this is kind of where Expo started in the first place, with Charlie trying to get the Quora app onto the App Store long, long ago. Well, maybe not too long. I don't want to make him seem too old here. Anyway, so you can build your app for production with EAS, and that means you can submit these apps to the store for either the Google Store, Google Play Store, or the iOS App Store. A cool little automation that we do is something called auto submit. So if you make a build, it's successful, you can auto submit it and it'll just show up in both stores for you, because we have also all of your credentials. So since we are able to manage those for you, like your provisioning profiles, etc., we can automate that process and get them on the stores for you. After that, you would submit it for review yourself. That's a button that you've got to click, and you've got to give information to both app stores and wait for review. Once they're in your users' hands, we often find that people will find a bug in their app. And this has happened to me before. And often it's something kind of silly, like there was a typo in my app, or maybe there's like a small bug on one specific page nested deep down. And I'm like, oh no, I wish I could fix that. But going through that whole process again, really, like, it takes my whole afternoon, and it makes me sort of dread all of the stuff I have to do. So one thing that you can do is, again, with updates. We talked about how you can preview PRs with each other earlier. Now you can sort of like preview a PR, but with your end users, where you send them a patch on top of your current app. We call that an update, and it goes over the air, and people will get it really, really fast. And this helps you fix small things or like critical bugs.
Yeah, and I feel like this is quite important feature that we work in React Native and we can do it. And there are several different ways that you can do it. Expo is one of them. Another one is code push from app services from Microsoft. The other one is module federation from CallStack Repack library. But this is very important. Everyone was in the situation that I submitted, and then there is this typo, like you said, and like it's really annoying. And like there are always bugs. Don't get me wrong, but like there are some bugs that needs to be fixed in this release and not in the next one.
Wait, you're shipping bugs?
Don't tell me that you are not. You found them, and then you find them, and then you fix them, and you just need to prioritize your work and like, yeah. But
true.
with
I ship
over-the-air
bugs all the time.
updates, you can fix them. You can ship them faster. Maybe you fix them at the same rate, but you can ship them faster. I wonder, from like product management perspective, from development perspective, how does it look from? Can you tell me something about like administrative panel for my application? What can I do just clicking the buttons on the website? What's the level of control there?
Yeah, I think I can take this one too. I'll give Cedric a chance to talk here in a minute. But
It's fine.
so with our website, you can see all of your data about your builds, your updates, your submissions, and some other data about them. Like we have something called channels, something called branches. You can see that on our website. We are building out our website more and more every day, and we've actually released some features pretty recently that you might not know about. For instance, now you can link your GitHub project to your Expo project. This allows you to build directly from our website, so you can click a button and kick off a build right there, and you don't have to have knowledge of your CLI. You can also add a label to your GitHub PRs, and we'll go and build that for you, which is a cool automation step. We're going to be doing more here. We allow you to do quite a few things on our CLI. Like, for instance, one thing we're working on is something called rollouts with updates, which allows you to give an update to a random percentage of your end users. And we're going to have support on our website for configuring those rollouts, seeing where they are, seeing who's getting what code. That's not quite there yet, but that's something that's coming soon.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, Jon, finishing up the Expo app services, is there something that I haven't asked you and you really want to talk about with Expo application services?
I think we went over like the big important parts for people to know about. So I'm feeling good there.
Okay. So let's go back to development. Let's go back to the code, to utilities that I actually run on my work computer. Like we said, Expo is a bunch of different utilities. And maybe let's start with some libraries, that you publish, that you maintain, and that are actually pretty useful for end users, for developers. I don't know, but I think that there is distinction there. There are some libraries that you need to use with Expo, and some that you can just use in like bare bones React Native projects. So let's start with that. Walk me through that. How does that work?
Generally speaking, like anything that works with the React Native community CLI should also work with Expo. There shouldn't be like too much difference there. There are some other things that are different. For example, lately we have been moving more towards Metro and actually implementing things such as require context, which is required for Expo Router. So some of those libraries might be a bit hard to actually implement yourself without Expo, since you would need to have like proper knowledge of the Metro bundler and how it ties into the CLI itself. So Expo Router, I think, is a really good example of that. Probably like users probably should only use that with the Expo CLI, but they don't have to use everything from Expo, right? So with Expo Router, we can basically generate like the whole navigation structure based on how you define the files in your app. It's very similar to like common web techniques that exist in Remix, Astro, Next, where you just have pretty much a file-based router. And that has been like pretty new for React, for native development, right? Where everything has to be like statically code or whatever. And with Expo Router bringing the web technique over from web, you don't have to do that anymore. So here again is a lot of automation involved.
So this was announced a while ago, and the stable version is with us for a few months already as well. I think it's a really powerful concept that we can just bridge the web and mobile worlds even closer together. And it's not you, but Expo, some people from Expo have been saying this, like universal apps, all of that concept, powerful concept. So what is the level of unification that I can get right now with Expo Router and my web Next.js project? Or should I not use Next.js project? Maybe I should just use Expo on web as well. What's the difference there using Expo on web and like not Expo on web, but just Next.js and sharing parts of my project? What would you recommend?
So that's still a really hard question again. Not just because like in React Native, we are limited to the primitives that React Native provides for all native platforms, right? So you cannot use a div. You have to put text in the text element. Those limitations are like just don't exist on web. Like with pure React, you can do pretty much whatever you want on the web. But you cannot unify those concepts together. Like you cannot use that directly in native world. There are some attempts though, like we have some prototypes internally where we use some Babel magic to convert some things, but it's highly experimental. But besides that, like because of those limitations, not all libraries in web work in native. Some libraries tie in heavily to the browser APIs, which is also just not available on native. With Expo Router, we try to bring another really big concept from web to native that makes a lot of sense to us, especially with file-based routing, and that is the concept of a URL, where instead of having like functions where you pass in parameters to render a screen, you basically resolve everything around a URL with query parameters. Like the concept is similar, but having the same mental model of a URL in native does allow you to actually unify those things better, where, some libraries are just not compatible at all. It is hard to say like what works best for you. If you have a whole custom like design system or design components, you can even just use them in both a separate non-Expo web project and an Expo project or a React Native project in general. But if you really go all the way there, you could even use Expo Router for both web and native. There are some interesting stuff that might be possible in the future there, but it's still a bit in a rough state. And things like React Native not supporting Win2CG might also not really help with that, where Win2CG is like a commonly known environment where JavaScript is being executed. And since it's not compatible with that, like certain APIs does not exist in React Native, unfortunately.
Okay, so I think I understand half of this answer, and like the answer is always it depends.
Yes, unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. But there is some level of unification that I can do with Next.js, with other web-based frameworks. There is a possibility to run just Expo on web and have some results, but that depends on the use case. And Expo Router was such a sexy topic, sexy library. Another one similar to this was Expo Image. And can you talk about this a little bit? What is Expo Image, and how would you use it? What it enables me to do?
So Expo Image was created to basically have us, or give us a way to add support for newer techniques, like newer animated PNG, or basically newer standards in web in imaging techniques that doesn't work out of the box in React Native or web. So with Expo Image, it adds some commonly used things like better caching that already exist right now with React Native Fast Image, for example. Unfortunately, those kind of libraries fell out of maintenance. It's a burden to support a really big open source project while not getting paid at all. So for these crucial things that we think this should just work for our users, we try to help, and we try to step in wherever we can. And I think Expo Image is a really good example for us trying to push React Native to the latest standards in image.
Okay, yeah. So I think what you said was that it's you created this because of the necessity. You needed this, and yeah.
It's partially because of necessity, yes. Yeah.
Okay, another utility which is very, very new and very, very exciting is debugging in Expo. And Cedric, I know that you had something to do with this. And
yes.
You had, yeah. So can you please get us up to speed? What is the state of debugging in React Native in Expo before your creation and after it? And what it is?
Yes. So if you've used React Native long enough, you might have recognized the debug.js remotely. And basically what it does is it moves the JavaScript execution from your phone to the browser while rendering whatever comes out of the logic of your app into the phone. And that worked because we had an async bridge that basically deferred all communication. But it also caused a lot of weirdness, where instead of all commands like render a text element with this content somewhere in your app, had to go over network to your computer and then back and forth. So it was far from ideal. It also changed the environment that much that, for example, if you were debugging a network race condition, you will probably run into other issues. So that wasn't great. But then we tried Flipper, which originally was a nice all-in-one tool where you could debug everything. Unfortunately, the meta team behind Flipper could not commit to the amount of work that needed to be done on the React Native side to really help push debugging forward. So ever since the introduction of Flipper, debugging has been in a very weird state, especially on like with the improvements that have come to React Native lately with like synchronous native calls. Debugging was in a very, very weird state where in some cases remote JS debug like didn't work at all. In other cases, Flipper worked, but then had other quirks, like it increased the build time by 3 times in development because it also had to bundle all these heavy native libraries. So not just like us at Expo, but also the people at Meta, especially on the Hermes team, but also React Native team, thought very deeply about this and decided that it has to be way better than it currently is. So especially the Hermes team and the React Native team, of course, but especially the Hermes team started focusing on what is already out there. Like, why can't we reuse an existing technique to debug things? And eventually, CDP was chosen to be adopted, not only because it's like one of the native platform tooling to debug, it's also like a very, very wide system that has so many different debugging functionalities that just work if we support the underlying framework. Like it's always a good idea if you need to debug something to use whatever is available natively. Like if you're debugging web, you already know the Chrome DevTools. But if you're debugging natively for a native crash, then it's better to use Xcode or Android Studio because nobody can beat that, right? They are the creator or owner of the native platform. So eventually, we started to adopt more and more Chrome DevTools protocol features. And at some point, we really focused on another really big missing feature, that was the network inspector. Like you can inspect any network calls right now from any device that you want, but if you put a proxy in between, right? If you use Charles proxy, then it's pretty much automatically on macOS. But like, is that really necessary to just figure out what a fetch call result is? We decided that shouldn't be like required if you just want to take a look at what your app is calling into. So with some prototyping internally, which is mostly Kudo Chen that worked on that, we found a way to actually make that possible and to work our way into supporting the network inspector in the Chrome DevTools as well. So
yeah, and in order, like, I played around with this, and like, in order to, to turn it on to like actually see the debugger, what do you do to do that?
So you can start your app as normally, either with run Android, run iOS, or just Expo start. You only have to press J, and that will automatically like boot up the whole system.
Yeah. So it only works in Expo now, right?
Yes. So
do you have any plans to upstream this to like the broader React Native community?
Yes. So as I said, like this is mostly because Hermes made it possible for us to adopt the CDP protocol fully. And because of that, like parts of this are actually in React Native as well right now. Like you can open the Chrome Inspect tab and then add Metro as an inspectable target and then connect through there directly to your React Native app. Like the biggest thing that we did at Expo is trying to make it stupidly easy to use it within Expo. So
yeah, of course,
instead of like trying to figure out how you could connect to something in cases of issues and everybody is panicking, it's just one button that you have to press. Like that's pretty much what we did. I'm happy to say that in React Native 73, something similar will be there, which I think it's called one-click Hermes debugging. And that should be you should be able to open it from your phone as well. And from there, like you have a pretty similar experience, although the network debugger is still an Expo only feature. Who knows that could change in the future.
Yeah, I guess you could use some other tools to spy on your network traffic. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like whatever works best for you. Like if we just added the network inspector as this works out of the box for you, so you don't have to set it up. But if you have like specialized tooling like Reactotron or even like your own proxy in between, that's perfectly fine to use as well. Like we do not force you to use it at all. It's just there out of the box, which we think is a necessity for frameworks in general.
Yeah, thank you, Cedric. I guess we'll be wrapping up soon this episode. And the division of work here, I guess, was that Cedric was talking about some more technical development facing stuff. Jon was saying a lot about Expo services. And so I have a question to both of you right now. What's the future looking like? What are your plans for near and long future? How is that going on? Cedric, you might start. You are warmed up already.
Yeah, sure. So I would say we never know what the future holds, right? Especially for native development. Android, Google and Apple have been known to break a lot of their old APIs. It does not work it does not work in any way similar to web, where if an API is stable and communicated within a whole committee, only then it gets adopted fully. That's so different to native that I hope that we will focus more on stabilizing or unifying APIs on the native level, like on the OS level, instead of us trying to merge things together. Just because we hear so many people saying why do I have to upgrade again? Because we know that those platforms are breaking things all the time. We try to make tooling that help that whole process, config plugins and Prebuilt. So I hope we can minimize that, but that's pretty much what I hope for the future.
Thanks. Jon, how about you? What are your hopes?
Yeah, so
plans?
We are releasing really soon a few things that, if you're listening to this, will already be out. These are things like with the updates API, there's a new use updates hook. We also now have a menu bar called Expo Orbit, which will help you launch builds. We also now support something called custom build jobs that allow you to run tests with your builds. So we are releasing a lot of stuff now, but these are in an effort to go towards some bigger ideas for the future. And we're thinking about a lot of things. So first off, we want to start having more workflows. This means being able to add credentials to a build, then make a build, then send it to one of your colleagues, and then maybe send a Slack notification that it worked. That would be one workflow. And maybe automate more of these steps for you in sequence. We think that's really interesting. In addition, we want to do stuff that's more far-reaching and it's going to take us longer, but hopefully make the community and working on these apps a lot nicer. This is better web support. So like we were talking about earlier, improving our routing, improving the support for writing just plain React apps with HTML and JSX and making that work in React Native and making it easy to make native or web components and have everything live together in one code base. We're also really interested in making it possible to call out to APIs safely from your app. So maybe having serverless functions or something of that. That's definitely something we've been talking about. There's a bunch of stuff around this. We want to make testing better. We want to run emulators in the cloud for you that allow you to run Detox or Maestro tests and do stuff like that. So that's a lot of what we're thinking about. And really we're just listening to you and everybody. If you're working on a legacy React Native app like you do all day, which it sounds hard, maybe there are some things that we can learn from you to include a few of these tools to help you out and make your weeks a little nicer.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah. You throw a lot of things out there. Maybe we'll just link your Twitter and your all the information. If anyone has any suggestions, what would they want to see added to Expo, reach out to Jon. He will make it happen.
Yeah, come find me. Will I make it happen? Yes. No, I'm kidding. It's a whole team effort. We also have a Discord too. Come and join it. There's a whole community of developers and we talk all the time.
Yeah. Thank you, Jon. Thank you, Cedric. I think it's wrap up. This was episode about Expo. Everyone knows what Expo is, but it is much more than you think you know. It's a set of utilities. It's a developer experience company. We discussed Expo origins, Expo future, features, and app services, and all of that. Thank you so much, guys. Again, thanks to our listeners. Check out more of the React Native Show podcast, more episodes on YouTube and other platforms. Subscribe to our newsletter. And yeah, see you in the next episode.